Hello and welcome. You are gaming with me, Brothgar, and today we're talking about gaming PCs, specifically the gaming PC that I want to build. I tell you what, I have always pretty much been on the budget side of building computers. I would say on the high end, but I've been always very price conscious about when it comes to building a PC, finding the best deals, finding the best CPU that I could just turn up to the little bit and get that sweet amount of performance out of it. And I tell you what, this is the computer, the high-end computer that I've always wanted to build. So if you're looking at it here, this is PC Part Picker. So if you're new to building PCs, this is a great place to start. And there's also a lot of different sources that I'm going to tell you about here just to kind of kick things off. Now, mind you, there are a lot of people that make money to be experts in this field, and those are the people you want to look to when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of things. I'm pretty good at building it, but it's only because I'm doing research and essentially I just regurgitate what other people have done. So this is a computer build that I would love to have. So here it is, PC Part Picker, and you pretty much start off with your CPU. So it's good to know what kind of CPU you want to have first, because your CPU is the most important component in your computer. I always say that when you go to build a computer, it should last you about 4 years. That's 4, that's 3, that's 4. 4 years of actual gaming performance. And my current PC with the i5 2500K legitimately has another year in it of straight up high-end PC gaming. So that means I've gotten my good 4 years out of that. So that's what I like to shoot for. And I say the i5Ks are great as far as like building platforms to start from. That's basically what I'd recommend for a CPU to start off. But as you can see here, I'm looking at a monster of a CPU, an absolute beast, and the likes of which the computing world is just now seeing. So on the left here is my current CPU on my system. Now this does really quite good. However, with the evolving different things going on here on YouTube, and since I make videos all the time and now have to record at 60 frames per second because that's the new standard, I don't necessarily have to record at that. I basically have a 35% CPU load that is already sitting on top of my computer before you go and add in a video game. So I am definitely seeing like performance drops when it comes to my gameplay. Now normally I record it at 30 frames and you guys wouldn't notice the difference because, well, quite frankly, I was always above 30 frames per second even though I had the CPU load on to it. However, it's starting to become a little bit of a problem and it's starting to annoy me. So I'm like, well, I'm either going to have a secondary computer that's going to do the capturing and then just leave this computer alone. But the only reason I found there is that it still takes $400 to really get into a PC that's powerful enough, even if I'm talking about used. So I'm looking at building a new PC, and it's going to start off here with the i7 5820K, baby. This is the CPU of kings, I tell you what. And it is, believe it or not, this is the low end of what this kind of current trend of CPU is. There's actually another version of this, and they're both 6 physical cores, but they're 12 threaded, so that is huge compared to my 4 threaded CPU right now. And then there's actually an 8-core version for $1,000, and it's pretty much ridiculous. But the point is, this is already a ridiculous CPU, but it's going to have a long longevity. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending that you start here. I would say either an i5 or an i7 with the 4 cores in the latest generation, so that'd be a 4000 and something is where I'd actually start. However, for my build, since I'm looking to really beast things up, I just kind of want this. This was what I'd really want in my king PC, baby. So the difference is that I am now stepping up to DDR4 as opposed to DDR3. And what that basically means is that there's more memory bandwidth, but that doesn't really apply too much when we're talking about gaming and stuff like that. It would apply if I was doing some of my more professional work that I do at actually like work, which is like 3D scanning stuff to where you would have 30 gigs loaded onto RAM in a heartbeat. You're talking about a billion point cloud, and it's pretty ridiculous stuff. And there would be a bit of a difference between the two, but for everyday usage, DDR3 to DDR4 is not really going to make any difference at all, except for DDR4 is definitely more expensive, and it was my biggest turnoff. However, since Black Friday is coming up here and Newegg is throwing down the deals, if I come on over here, you'll see this combo package going on here. I got the i5 lined up with a gigabyte motherboard, and I'm going to get into how I actually went about picking that motherboard here in a second. However, I'm picking up the crucial memory here, and the whole package there is you get $118 off for the combo deal, and then $40 off of the instant deal. So you're getting a lot of money back, and if you actually get your money back from the mail-in rebate, I could basically get the memory for free. So that throws that hurdle out of the way. Thank you, Black Friday. Thank you, sweet Newegg combo deals. I tell you what, you want to look at the combo deals when it comes to Newegg, because $700 for this combination is a good deal if you are looking for an extreme PC. At any rate, getting into the motherboard, now that I already have my CPU in mind, I will take PC Picker and I'd say, well, what motherboard do I want? Now, as you can see there, I picked the MSI X99S. Now, the reason I picked this one over like the ASRock is because I ended up looking into the different SLI ports. So this one here has 3-way SLI, but let's get into the quick details of this. So if I jump on over here to this motherboard and I look at the specifications, what you'll notice is that with a 28 PCI Express lanes, which is what this CPU has, and yes, CPUs do have PCI Express lanes access, and as you can see here, my old CPU, or the current one that you're actually seeing me record on, is running PCI Express 2.0, and then it has 16 lanes of Express. So automatically when I go to throw in a couple more GPUs on top of the actual unit itself, they got to go somewhere. So I can't, it always has to share. Now, realistically, they've done experiments and shown that pretty much 8x PCI Express 3.0 is sufficient for how all graphics card of this current age. Now, I'm not talking out of my butt here. I am actually referring to what people have attempted to do in their certain like research. So impact of PCI Express on gaming performance. Now, does this really apply all the time, all throughout, into the future? Not necessarily, but this is a key point. When it comes to actually figuring out what you're going to do with your PC, you want to do the research, and you want to make sure your research is relatively new or it still applies to the technology you're looking at. So this is PCI Express 3.0, and this is what this guy did here is they tested PCI Express 2.0 to 3.0, and then 8x and 16x, and what do you see? Basically the same frame rates for everything that they got going on there. So what you see there is that they're GTX Titans here. We're not limited by the bandwidth of the PCI Express slots. It's a more advanced thing, and I would do your own research if you have questions about it right now. But what I basically noticed when I came to this motherboard is I looked right down here as far as the 2-way SLI mode and the 3-way SLI mode, mainly because I actually have 2 GPUs now, and I'll get into that later. However, what I have is 8x, 8x, and 8x, which is sufficient for my current graphics cards if I wanted to upgrade to 3 GPUs, but I don't. But right now, I can definitely support a 16 and an 8x, and that is good because in the future here, I'm still going to have that availability if I really wanted to do dual GPU. However, I always recommend, and I say it's the most simplest thing, just to stick with the biggest, fastest single GPU you got, and when things start to get slow for you, just upgrade that. Now, there are a couple tricks, and I'll be getting into that later, of how you can get better deals on your GPU, because you don't necessarily need to pay the brand new price, and GPUs can be very expensive if they're brand new, especially if it's their current generation. All right, so if we jump back to my motherboards here, the ASRock basically had a different setup for that, which I didn't really like. It was, what it would run is, I think it would be like 16, 8, and 4, which I don't necessarily think would necessarily work out. It had a different combination that I didn't like. I like this combination setup, and that's why I stuck with the MSI. Plus, they have a pretty good reputation for being good overclockers, and it was part of the combo deal. So, it's also one of the highest rated motherboards. So that's kind of why I picked that motherboard in itself. So if I move back to my part picker here, and move on to the next thing. Obviously, I'm going to recommend anybody who's building a PC in 2014, the end of 2014, 8 is probably going to want to be your minimum. And if you want to go for more, you can get 16 gigabytes of RAM. Either or, going to be a good option. As we move on beyond that, we're talking about storage. Now, storage is an interesting topic right now because solid-state drives are relatively small and relatively expensive for what they are. There are some good deals that are coming out for larger solid-state drives that are kind of in, you can get 250 gigs, you can get 500 gigs for somewhat decent prices. However, neither of those storage capacities is really what you want. If you can get up to like a terabyte for your main drive, that's what you really want. So here's an interesting thing that I'm going to be taking advantage of again. Now, in my current computer, I have a thing that's called Intel Rapid Storage Technology. Only available through Intel, so that if you have an AMD CPU, I think you're out of luck, unless there's an alternative to that. However, what this basically does is I have a SSD that's very fast, and what it does is it basically runs in RAID 0 with my internal system disk, which is a 1 terabyte just platter drive, which isn't relatively fast at all. This would add pretty long load times, especially when it came to Battlefield. I throw this on here, I literally load 6 times faster into anything. It made my computer 6 times faster. Throwing an SSD on your computer is the biggest performance upgrade that you can probably get in this current generation. So what I did here is I tied this in, and mind you, I believe the Intel Rapid Storage technology is maxed out at 60 gigabytes as far as a cache thing, but what it is a hybrid drive. Now you can actually find a couple of these online, and what it is a combination, again, between an SSD, which runs only as cache, so it's kind of like RAM to a point, but for your main hard drive. So once you load something up once, and you turn around and you use it again, it's going to load 6 times faster that second time. And it makes a big difference when you're talking about games, because it picks it up on it real quick and things load rapidly fast. So that is an excellent way, and for $100 I can get basically I can build myself a 1 terabyte hybrid drive with 60 gigabytes of cache. And there's no hard drive out there that's hybrid at the moment that can even come close to that. So that is a very decent storage option for the current moment. And if I wanted to throw in another drive there for just recordings, I could do that as well. But you're talking about $100 for hard drive. Not too bad, not unreasonable, and a huge amount of performance for what I'm actually paying for right there. Realistically, you could pay a lot more for a single drive that'll operate a lot slower than this combination will. Moving on, there is 2 video cards. Now I have a 7950, which is what you've been watching all my games on a single one. And then I actually went over to eBay and bought myself a second 7950 used for about $120. Now, to be honest, that is an absolutely awesome price for the amount of computing you get out of a 7950. I mean, you can run Battlefield 4, a lot of those games, you can run them definitely high, almost ultra, although you might have to drop back a few things if you really want to get some better frame rates. Realistically, you're going to get a lot of graphical performance out of a 7950. Now, a 7950 is yesterday's hot card, and that's a real option when it comes to if you're going to buy a GPU used. Yesterday's hottest card is definitely going to be usually a lot cheaper than your current generation graphics card. So it can be a better deal if you're willing to risk having a used card, or even maybe a new card that's just been resold here recently on eBay. So that's a couple of ways I've actually done this. One way, when I first built this computer, I rolled out an AMD 5850, which was a very hot card. It worked great. It ran Battlefield 3 on Ultra, and I bought that for $150, used it for a year, sold it for $150, and then rolled that money into a 7950, which again, I bought new, but I bought with a game pack of 3 different games, which they actually gave me the physical codes for, and then I resold those codes for $60, and then I got that much more off of a $250 graphics card at the time. And so that combination there just really worked out for me. I think I upgraded for about $30 and got a huge performance gain out of it, upgrading to a 7950. And then when you're talking about going to SLI or Crossfire, buying a used card of yesterday's hot card is a great way to get some really good GPU. However, if I was buying new and I just wanted the latest and greatest stuff, probably a GTX 970 if I can find it on sale for about $300. I wouldn't really recommend ever buying a graphics card more than $300 because I think it's just a waste, but that's my personal opinion. However, that is definitely a solid GPU. And one thing about when you're buying a GPU as compared to your CPU, if you're buying it all new, brand new, off the shelf, you're probably going to want to keep your GPU and your CPU relatively even. Now, in this case, you're definitely going to want to have your CPU as high as possible. Why? Why do you want your CPU as high as possible? Because several years down the road, your CPU is going to become your limiting factor. And then if your CPU becomes a limiting factor in your gaming experience, it's not going to matter what else you have on your system, even if it's an awesome GPU. If your CPU becomes limited, your game's going to start to stutter, lag, and shudder, and it's going to be really unplayable. So that's why you really got to, base your computer off a CPU that's going to last 4 years, and then you can upgrade your video card as needed in the future. Moving on beyond there, I already have a Corsair 750, basically. I already have this, so that's why I'm showing it to you. And that's basically just a nice unit as far as the actual power supply goes. Again, I already had to buy this because my last power supply went out, and this looks like a pretty good one, a trustable brand, and it has plenty of amperage across the 12 volt channel right there. So it'll be plenty enough for 2 GPUs and the CPU on top of that. And again, using Part Picker, they'll give you a good idea of how much wattage you need. So I still have an extra 100 watts above there. Starting to push the limits a little bit, but not too bad. I should be just fine. With that, I'll be running the Roswell Thor V2. So this case is one that is absolutely awesome. I think it looks really cool. Is it over $100? Yes. Do I ever really think you should buy a case over $100? No. I think pretty much right around $80 to $90 is a fair-ish price when it comes to a full tower. However, they will throw as much, you can basically throw as much money as you want at a case. But the reason I'm buying this one is because it has a lot of very large fans. You have a side fan, which is going to cool the cards. You have a rear fan, which is 140 millimeters. And then you have a couple of top fans. It looks like a 230. So you got tons and tons of airflow, and that's really going to keep everything cool. So that's why I'm going with it. Plus, I think it looks cool, and it's a nice big case as compared to my medium tower, which has gotten very cramped. All right, so that pretty much sets up the entire PC itself. Now, there are a couple of sources that I ended up using when it came to researching this entire build. Again, I ended up looking at Intel's here, thinking, okay, the rapid storage technology, this is how I build my hybrid drive here. And then I also always like to recommend Tom's Hardware. They have this things like the best GPU for the money or the best CPU for the money, based on whatever month it is. And they also go through here, and that's, again, this is a very good starting block right here. The best gaming CPU for under $200. Yeah, that's going to do you very good for a long time, and that should probably last the life of your PC right there. If you kind of go below that, you start talking about these more budget gamer PCs, you are going to become limited over the next several years if you're not already. I don't think you are already, but I definitely think the i5 4000 series is where you want to start. The other thing is Passmark will give you a good idea of just how many CPUs there are out there and a bit of comparison as far as their actual computing. I like to use this benchmark for a couple of things. However, it doesn't necessarily translate into gaming performance. So you always want to look at your benchmarks when it comes to choosing components, because that is going to be your deciding factor. Not how many cores, not how many gigahertz. That's all crap, and it's become very, very confusing. Look at benchmarks, see what other people are coming up with, and then build based on that knowledge. All right, beyond that, I believe I've already showed you that company right there. And then there is the Guru 3D. These people also have a lot of very good reviews as far as comparing different SLI setups based on different, CPU setups as well. So you can see there differences in what you might get out of your actual core there. And yes, your CPU does make a difference when it comes to running SLI setups or Crossfire setups, whichever way you want to go. The the Tech Yes City is a YouTuber that does a lot of these reviews, so he will explain a lot of this information to you. He's got a very nice channel set up here, and this is actually where I pulled some of my inspiration for this build from, so I wanted to throw him in there. You can also find his link to his channel below here in the description of this video, and I'll actually link up this video as well if you are really looking to build a nice expensive PC for that early adapters 4K gaming monster setup. And I do highly recommend this guy. He's got a lot of good information there. At any rate, guys, this wraps up my giant PC build. I tell you what, if I actually go out and buy this stuff, this will be one awesome gaming rig. At any rate, guys, have a great day. I will see you in the next episode. Peace. Brothgar out.